It really is music for focus, music for mindfulness. You'll hear like little bells throughout, little like sort of scraping sounds. It's really to pierce your listening so that you are brought back to the music. And if you're brought back to the music, then you can be brought back to your breath.
That was Cheryl B. Engelhardt, and you're listening to episode 157 of the Building Psychological Strength podcast, where we uncover the information, tools, and techniques to turn our mind into our most valuable asset.
The courage to face fears with persistence.
Being able to be present enough in this moment to choose my response thoughtfully.
We have the strength to bend to life stressors, to bend to adversity without snapping, without breaking.
There are only 6 things that contribute to our quality of life, and they are all experiences.
In every moment, we are deciding who we want to be and how we want to live our lives.
Noticing what your brain is doing and then being able to make choices.
Mobilize the things that we know lift us up.
Fear is not logical. It's primal.
Oh, wow. Is this going to be a great episode? I'm so excited that you are joining me for this episode of the Building Psychological Strength podcast. My name is April Seifert, and I'm your host. Today's going to be really great because we are coming at some impactful topics like morning routines, gratitude, that type of thing, but we're doing it from a very different perspective. And I'm just going to leave you hanging there for a second before I dive into what that means. I want to start with a quick listener shout out. I want to say thank you to Maya Misagi for your incredible comment on iTunes. She said, positive, motivating conversations that get me into an upbeat and seize the day mindset. I appreciate the continual emphasis on key psychological concepts that impact us and are very real every day, but not often talked about. Recommended for everyone looking to be and stay inspired to live their best life. Maya, you are amazing. Thank you so much for that incredible review on iTunes. And if you have not reviewed the podcast, I would so appreciate it. If you could give us a rating and a review, it's a really big deal. It helps so incredibly much in helping us get the podcast out to more people so that they can stumble upon the content that they need to understand their minds and make it into a valuable asset, just like you are doing. And on that note, not everyone decides to do that. Not everybody decides to take the time to focus on themselves and reflect and become more self-aware, but you are. So seriously, sincerest congratulations. I'm so happy to have you here. I'm so happy to be with you on this journey. This is work that I do on a daily basis for myself as well. And I am so glad that we're here all together on this journey toward building psychological strength. Let's talk a little bit about where we're going today from the perspective of this review from Maya. Maya talks about mindset, and she talks about psychological concepts that impact us day to day. And that's the direction we're really going with this interview today, but from a very unique perspective. So I mentioned it a bit ago. We are going to be diving into things like morning routines, things like gratitude. These are definitely impactful forces that help us build our own psychological strength on a day-to-day basis, exactly like Maya was mentioning in her review. And we're talking about that today from the perspective and from the standpoint of a woman who has a very interesting career. Today, we are talking with Cheryl B. Engelhardt. She is a composer, and she has recently written a beautiful album called Luminary that is music to help people meditate and become more mindful. It is absolutely gorgeous, and I'm so excited to have Cheryl on the podcast today. So Cheryl is, I mentioned, a composer. She's actually on her 5th album that she's released, but the other albums that she's done have been more sort of pop or rock or something like that. But this album, it's a solo piano album called Luminary that she wrote while she was doing some work in Greece. She tells this story in the interview of this beautiful abandoned, nearly abandoned town where she got to work on this gorgeous grand piano. And there's a lot of details detail behind how this album came to be. So definitely listen for that. But this is her 5th album. She is somebody who has been trained at Cornell and at Julliard. So this woman knows her way around a piano, let me tell you that. But what's neat about this interview, and you're like, what the heck does this piano thing have to do with psychological strength, right? What's neat about this is Cheryl is very open about her own background and her struggle with anxiety. She gets really open with us around what that anxiety felt like and how it manifested, and how she ultimately made the decision that she was going to try to rid herself of her anxiety and went on this mission to figure out how to do that. And one of the biggest things that helped her was her morning routine, which includes things like gratitude. It includes things like acknowledgement. It includes things like writing down her dreams from the night before and her goals for the day, that morning routine, and the practice of mindfulness and meditation. These are things we talk about a lot. They're things that I think people can easily cast aside as being, they can't be that impactful, but they absolutely are. And there's a reason why we keep talking about them. So today's episode is a little bit different because we're going to be talking about this with Cheryl from both her individual, unique perspective in being somebody who has lived with anxiety and also has dealt with it and found a way to move forward in spite of it, but also from the perspective of this beautiful album that she is putting out into the world. And I'm going to give you a little teaser. After we stopped recording, I asked Cheryl if she would be willing to allow us to tack on, at the end of this episode, one of the tracks from her album. And she agreed. So listen to this episode, listen to this interview, this beautiful conversation with Cheryl, and then stay to the end and listen for the most gorgeous track from her new album, Luminary. And for the time being, depending upon when you're listening to this, if you pre-order it, this is before it goes out, I believe she said February 7th. If you pre-order the album, she will send you basically the album with a set of affirmations on top of it. She talks all about where the album title came from and where these affirmations came from and her hope for you as a listener. She'll send that to you absolutely free. So an amazing way to get even more out of this gorgeous music and really deepen your mindfulness and your meditation practice. All right, that's enough blah, blah from me. I'm so excited for you all to hear this conversation with Cheryl B. Engelhardt. Cheryl, I'm really excited that you are joining us for this episode of the podcast. You have such a cool background and are putting out such amazing things into the world. This is going to be fantastic. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start a little bit with a bit about you and a bit about the maybe personal journey that you've been on to get to the point that we're at today, because I haven't ever interviewed someone on the podcast who has a background like yours and someone who does the work that you do. So I would love for you to give us a little bit of an overview of who you are, the work you're doing, and what got you to this point of doing the work that you're doing today.
I am a composer, first and foremost. I did a long stint of being a singer-songwriter, performing artist. Like I toured around the country and Europe with a band, but that I've sort of transitioned to being just a writer as a commercial writer, film score composer. I do a lot of work with social justice choirs. And that all stemmed from having a very musical childhood. I've been playing the piano since I was about 2. It was always a hobby for me. I was in all the plays in high school. I was a total ham. And then I went to Cornell University where I was like, I'm going to be a marine biologist. That was, I had posters of dolphins and whales and everything on my walls growing up, not rock stars or anything. Right after college, I still was considering it a hobby. And I ended up getting a job working for the government doing scuba diving research for water quality testing.
So random.
Super random. I spent a lot of time in a wetsuit, a lot of time underwater. It was interesting. And we had this month break when the river froze in November. And a friend of my mom's friend knew I wrote music. And I had always sort of dabbled in just writing my own piano music. And he invited me to go to Italy with him for a month to work on creating some videos and music for videos for a website for a hotel that was in Rome. Fast forward, I never went back to the scuba diving because I was like, all right, writing music. And I sort of learned really early, like music can take me to really cool places. But I found myself working as an assistant in an advertising agency, post-production house. They're the people that sort of edit and put music onto the commercials that you see. That led me to getting promoted to being an actual composer there. And I recorded my first album while I was there and in their beautiful studios, and realized I really liked creating my own songs. I put a band together. We started gigging. I was like, oh, I like this gigging thing. So I left the composing job and started doing my own singer-songwriter, put out a couple albums, like piano chick pop stuff. So I have 4 of those out. And in the meantime, I was working on licensing, getting the music on TV shows and all sorts of different things. And so fast forward to a couple years ago, I was sort of in my 10th year of struggling with monthly panic attacks, which started right before I turned 30. I'm about to turn 40. And I think it was because I really had this one goal of getting a Grammy, and I had not really honored the steps I was taking as an independent musician. I was just looking at this goal, and Grammy by 30, it was like literally my bank account passwords, like everything was like Grammy by 30, Grammy by 30. And so I didn't get that Grammy by 30. And I think I really started to panic about like what I was doing with my life. And panic attacks for me are very physical. Like for a couple years, I thought I had like a parasite or some allergy to food. Like it was it was like I have food poisoning, and then I take a couple days to recover. It like takes me out. So I was sort of thinking that I was done with that by the time I turned 37. I tried a bunch of different things, and none of it matters to even share about because it wasn't it. It was all about really just connecting with myself and listening to what was the anxiety trying to tell me. And I kind of started to do more of my own research. I'm like, I am trained as a researcher. Like I have the tools to figure this out myself, since all these doctors and other things couldn't. And I started realizing that there's a lot of value in morning routines, like having a gratitude practice and honoring the best moments you had in the past 24 hours and actually writing those down and starting to look for the good everywhere. Having my own freelance musician career, I work from home. Structure is not a thing that's like, I don't get up and get coffee and get dressed and get in the car and go to work and then come home. Like there's not that kind of regiment. So putting together a morning routine really started to make me feel a little more stable in the sense that I knew what there was for me to do and get me started on the right foot. That led me to start to research meditation. And as someone who can barely sit still for 5 minutes, I was like, this is not going to be a thing that I will probably do. And I started meditating. And 2 months into meditating, I had my last panic attack. And today was day 576. So we're talking about over a year and a half of no anxiety. And I mean, I can feel anxiety coming out. And I have a bunch of my lines of defense, essentially, for chamomile tea, take hot bath with lavender. Like I have a list of these 10 things. And it's not to say I don't get anxious ever or things don't trigger me into thinking that was going to happen. But I haven't had a full blown panic attack since I really started my own morning meditation practice, which led me to thinking that I wanted to enhance it with music. I was looking for more. I couldn't find what I was looking for, so I created it. And that sort of led me to creating this record, Luminary, this past summer. And that is the longer nutshell.
I love it. It's so helpful because the flow of your life, I think there's a lot of elements with that so many people can relate to, right? Having that lofty goal for yourself that in some ways causes more harm than good sometimes. I'm all for having big goals, whatever, but I'm also one to, I would say, minimize anything that is leading me to go down that anxious path, anything that's causing me to ruminate, anything like that. And so I think that's something that people can relate to is having a goal that might be doing more harm than good, and also relate to feeling anxiety. And I kind of want to start there because you mentioned that yours was very much in the body. Can you explain a little bit about what your anxiety feels like? Because I think people confuse it with being nervous about something or whatever, and it really does manifest, or it can, in very different ways. So I'm kind of wondering if you can give us a little bit of the lowdown on what yours felt like.
Yeah, I mean, I know for me that my feelings of being nervous and feelings of excitement are very similar, like almost indistinguishable. And for me, I think that sometimes I would get an idea and I might had a really big idea and I thought it was anxiety. I thought it was my anxiety trying to pull me out of the game, because it's like, oh no, that's a big deal. If you actually get that, your life would change. You may not be safe anymore. People might look at you. You know, it's vulnerable to put art out into the world. And I think, you know, when I ended up talking to my anxiety, I did some work with someone who sort of was able to have me access that. It was all just to keep me safe. So I think that when I get excited about a big idea, I had to really distinguish it. And I had to actually like say it out loud or say it to myself, like, I am excited about this. This does not scare me. I will be okay. Like, it sounds really like very basic and kind of dumb, but like, that's what I would have to do in the beginning, because like you said, it felt like excitement. And I think that's just sort of a thing out there, that like the feelings and what your body does when you're nervous versus excited, like they're sort of very similar biochemically. So that's the first thing. It's like, it felt excited, but I like feel it behind my heart. It's definitely like a heart rate thing. My heart rate would definitely go up. For me, it was like a release thing, like empty out everything. I know that the fight or flight kind of picked up, you know, that was happening for me. And I would just, you know, I would be in the bathroom. I'd empty out my stomach would be emptied out. Like, it was very physical like that, right? Without getting too disgusting. But that was part of that, like, okay, empty out the body so we don't have to, like, you know, we don't have to be digesting food in our you know, intestines if we're going to go for this run, because we're going to be you know, flighting or fighting or whatever we're going to be doing. Mm-hmm. So I knew what was happening, but like all the knowing, you know, doesn't really do anything. So it got physical in that way as well. And then the last part of it usually became this more like sort of exhaustion in my limbs, like almost like a hopelessness. And that was definitely like where the anxiety, where I knew the attack was, like, it was there, because I was having this like nothing matters, it's all hopeless, and sort of just exhaustion. And it's just like the worst feeling ever. It's totally gross. Yeah.
You know, you mentioned hitting this point when you were 37 and you decided, nope, no more. I'm going to get a handle on, you know, this anxiety that I've been dealing with. I had a similar situation where I reached a point where I realized that the way that it manifested for me is this pressure on my chest. I felt like someone was pushing on my chest, and I would realize that I wasn't breathing. I wasn't taking really any breaths, maybe shallow ones, because what would happen is after a while, if I was feeling really anxious, after a while, I would just gasp, like, because at some point your body will breathe, like it will make you breathe. But I realized I was essentially holding my breath for an extremely long time before my body would finally kick in and do it for me. And it's so strange, because that's not something that I would equate with, oh, I'm nervous to go do this one thing. That's something that feels completely different, that is much more physical than just sort of nervousness where I'm thinking through something in my mind, or I'm kind of trying to plan or reason or logic through something. It was very physical for me as well. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. I would love to talk a little bit about your morning routine. This is something that within the Peak Mind membership, we actually did a full monthly workshop for our members on figuring out your personal values, figuring out your goals for the day, like what kind of person do you want to show up as? What do you look like when you're at your best? That kind of thing. And then how to design a custom morning routine to support that. And it's one of the workshops that people say was the most transformational one that we've done so far, because that morning routine is so powerful. So I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about what you do and you know, the practices that you've embedded in yours, and how that's supporting you throughout the day to feel a bit better and show up better.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to talk about this. I've actually decided, because I couldn't find a journal, like a morning journal, that was either, all the ones that I could find were like super big prompts, like you had to like sit down and write essays. And I was like, that's not interesting. And then the other ones that I found were too simple, and like they didn't quite get enough in. So I actually created one for myself, printed it like a real book. And then I was like, maybe I should sell this. So I'm going to sort of tie it in with the record Luminary and make it the Luminary journal. But I've been testing it on myself, and I'm 2 years into this as well. Like this, it's a couple days into the new year, and this is year 3 of doing this exact routine. So what it is for me is the first thing I do when I get up is I write down whatever I can remember from my dreams. Some of the research that I've done has shown that if you are able to write out your dreams, you're actually acknowledging something that your subconscious is trying to get you to see. And if you can see it and maybe extrapolate a lesson or something, it's going to solve something that you may not even know you need to solve, or something that you do need to solve that you know you need to solve. So I try to be really, really aware of my work right when I wake up. You know, my husband knows not to like talk to me in the morning. I'm like, wait, I gotta write this down. It's also something I started doing after my father passed away, which is about 7 years ago, because he would come every couple months. I would sort of see him, and I wanted to like remember what those, because they're now like the only way I can create new memories with him. So when I would see someone that I missed or loved in a dream, I would want to write that down as well. So I have this little, just 1 or 2 sentences. I write what I can remember from a dream, and then I write 3 things that I'm grateful for. And I try to be as specific as possible. And it doesn't matter how big or small. I've gotten good at not judging what I'm grateful for. Like I want to say I'm grateful for running water, when really like I'm grateful that I slept 8 hours. Or I'm grateful that my socks are fuzzy or clean or something. You know, like it can be anything. So I write those 3 things. And then I write my favorite 24-hour moment. So best 24, B24M, best 24-hour moment in the past day. So that has been really key for me, who I am like a type A. I can fix it. If there's nothing to fix, I will probably break something so that I can fix something. So I'd always been that person that can walk into a room and see what's broken. So I knew that I needed to start to train my brain to walk into a room and see everything that's wonderful. So I write this, what's the best moment I had in the past 24 hours, so that I go through my day now looking for what's that thing going to be that I'm going to write tomorrow morning. And I think it's very subtle. I don't actually like have that thought throughout the day. I mean, there's a moment or two when, New Year's Day, my husband and I had this hilarious dinner, and we were just like crying. We were laughing so hard. And I was like, this is going to be my moment tomorrow morning. Like, every once in a while I'll be conscious about it. But so I write that, and it makes me reflect on the past day. And then I just write something that I want to accomplish today, like one thing. If I do this one thing, it will be good. And like some days, I do not want to get out of my pajamas. I have to force myself to change and do some work. And sometimes it's exhausting generating the whole entirety of your career. And sometimes I just don't want to do it. So I'm like, all right, I kind of can let myself off the hook as long as I'm like, okay, I just need to send this one email, or I need to do this one thing. So I write down the one thing. And then I write down my manifestation mantra, which is something I like to keep for a week or a couple days. And it's kind of just something I remind myself when I'm feeling down. So it might be, I'm strong, I'm powerful, I'm a charting musician, like I'll get my music on the charts, or I'll do this, or, it's something positive that I can counteract negative thoughts with.
I love that. I love that sequence of things. There's something that you said actually that I want to dive into, is your mind starting to look for that moment in the last 24 hours. People talk about there's a ton out there in social media land and other places about the power of a morning routine. There's a reason, though. I mean, There's actual really great evidence for why. And some of it is from, the aspect of like goal setting and getting strategic about things and breaking things down and planning. And there's a lot of benefit to that. But what you're talking about is this fundamental ability of our mind. Something I like to say a lot is that our minds are very powerful, but they're not that sophisticated. Meaning, if you give your mind a goal, it's going to try to chase it for you. It doesn't matter what it is. So if you're the type of person who's accustomed to watching negative things, watching dangerous things, you seek that out in your life, your mind, being the unsophisticated thing that it is, it's going to assume, oh, okay, cool. That's what you want me to look for you. That's your goal. And it's going to goal seek toward that stuff, whatever it is. You can do the same thing, though, in the opposite direction, which is what you're talking about around gratitude and something that happened that's amazing, or writing down a win that you had or a lesson that you learned. Your mind is going to just at some point catch on, because it has there's sort of fundamental jobs of our mind, and one of them is to get us through the day safely, which there's things to say about that, but get us through the day safely, expending the least amount of energy possible. And the way to do something with the least amount of energy is to make it automatic and just like get it done during the day. So your mind just kicks in and it's like, okay, cool. She's going to make me come up with this thing later. Either I'm going to work really hard later on to try to remember it, or I'm just going to automatically look for it during the day and make it easier on all of us. So it starts to goal seek in that way, just to help us out. But like folks listening to this, like think of how different your day will feel if your mind is constantly scanning for positive things, for wins, for things you're grateful for that moment that you want to remember and cherish. Your life is different. Your life feels totally different when that's the case.
Yep.
I love that. I also use a journal. It's from Best Self Co. called the Self Journal. Adore it. There's some similar elements, some that are not. I love the idea of writing down your dreams. That's really cool. I haven't heard that one before, so love that.
Yeah, that was when I went down a deep rabbit hole on the science behind some subconscious stuff. So, but all of that's to say, it's like, you know, it's half a page. And they're prompts. So it's not like I'm filling out pages and pages. It takes me less than 5 minutes. And then I do a minimum of 5 minutes of yoga. I have like back issues and that always gets the blood flowing. And then I do a minimum of 5 minutes meditation up to an hour. I do often do full hour meditations. And I use the app Simple Habit. I tried a bunch of different apps and that one sort of gave me most of what I was looking for. And then I try to do some sort of exercise. Sometimes that will be throughout the day. Sometimes it's in the morning. It depends on what I'm planning on doing. So I have in my little journal, I have a couple little check boxes so that you can just come back at night or the next morning and be like, did I, so I say yoga or stretch. You know, some people don't have a yoga practice, which is fine. Yoga or stretch, just move the body, like wake up get the fluids going. Meditation, acknowledgement. So something that I do talk about in this journal, I have a couple essays sort of explaining the science behind each thing. There's a lot of science around acknowledging other people and asking for acknowledgement. So making sure you do one a day. So that's something that I make sure I do throughout my day. And then affirmations, figuring out, and different than a mantra. So mantra is something that you repeat to yourself over and over again. And then affirmations are positive I am statements. And again, it goes back to training the brain to think differently automatically. So instead of saying, I'm not worthy of this, or I don't deserve this, or, you know, you're starting different conversations and you're getting that to be the new normal versus what has been normal for so many years for whatever reason. So I have these little check boxes of affirmations. I actually have created a whole series of affirmations to go with it. But that's it. That's sort of the morning routine. It can be up to, you know, if I do all the minimum of everything, the 5 minutes yoga, 5 minutes, it ends up being about a 15 to 23 minute morning routine, depending on what you want to do more of or less of. And then a couple things to just remember to do throughout the day. And even if I don't do them, I'm like, I see that little checkbox of like acknowledgement. Oh yeah, I haven't acknowledged my husband in a while, or I haven't acknowledged this co-writer. And I have a whole thing on what acknowledgement actually means. It's not just thanking them, but that's maybe for another time. But yeah, that's what that is.
I love it. Something that I want to highlight, so many of the techniques that we've found to be the most impactful within psychology, so many of those techniques, they're very simple. They are deceptively easy to do. Mm-hmm. This is one of them, right? Yep. Writing down something you're grateful for takes 3 seconds. And if you're having a hard time coming up with it, I've said this recently a number of times on the podcast, but it was so moving for me that I feel like I need to say it again. A friend of mine once said, if you're having a tough time coming up with what you're grateful for, imagine that you woke up tomorrow with only the things you were grateful for today. And if that doesn't punch you in the stomach, I don't know what will, because immediately I'm flooded with, oh my God, I don't want to lose this and this and this and this and this person and these people and all of these things. So yes, you are. You're grateful for something. But the most deceptively simple things. Another example is from a previous show that I did with Steve Hayes, the founder of Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, something called diffusion, thought diffusion, saying, becoming a perceiver of our own thoughts. I'm aware that I'm noticing that I'm having a thought that, you know, I'm not going to do well on this upcoming task that I have to do, project that I have to do, whatever. Diffusion is deceptively simple, similar to this morning routine, but they are some of the most impactful things that you can possibly do. So don't roll your eyes and think, okay, there's no way that's a big deal. The example I always give for people to put this in the realm of health and like physical health is, have you ever had to go to PT, like physical therapy?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, right. So I remember going to PT my first time. I was trying to resolve a knee issue that I had gotten when I was distance running. And the exercises they gave me were laughably tiny. Like these tiny little knee movements that I was supposed to do, because what they were doing is isolating the muscle that was weak or imbalanced, right? But these exercises, I'm like, oh my God, this is so stupid. There's no way this easy thing is doing anything. But it is. It absolutely is, right? You're doing a deceptively simple thing that has like magnitudes of thousands of an impact on what your experience will actually be. And I've belabored this point, but I'm doing it because, you know, what you're talking about is so fundamental and so necessary for people to take on and begin doing.
I mean, if you want to look at it from a science perspective, it's like, what elements have changed in my life in the past 2 years? I have not moved. Everything's the same with my job. Same thing with the dog, same thing with the husband, like same thing with family. Like there have been no external factors that have changed except that I started this morning routine, which included gratitude, meditation, yoga. So 2 months into starting it, my panic attacks that I had for a decade, every month for 10 years, stopped. Why? I didn't change my diet. I didn't change my exercise. I didn't change anything except adding in a morning routine. So I feel like if that's not like concrete proof that this is definitely does something, at least for someone who's suffering with anxiety or unpredictability in their lives, which was like the story of my life, you know, and just having to create every day and so, like whatever the common denominator is for someone else, I feel like this is so much not a big effort. Why not try it?
Right.
You know, it's like, it's not like we're saying, okay, now you need to eat only green beans for 6 weeks. Like that's not a thing. You know, it just seems like to me, it became the no-brainer and something I would never not do. There is a little bit of me that like the ego loves to see that number 576, 577 days straight. Like I definitely like the little counter helping me make sure I don't forget to meditate because I am competitive with myself. So I think that helps. But at the same time, whatever helps you, whatever you know about yourself, use it to your advantage.
Yeah. There's a few episodes that I want to plug. I mentioned Steve Hayes. I'll link that up in the show notes. Also, episode 147 I did with a woman named Ariel Garten. She created this product called The Muse. It is, yeah. Wonderful episode on meditation and mindfulness if you want more deep information there. Also 149 with Sarah McVonnell. She's a recognition and acknowledgement expert. So I really want to get to this album that you mentioned. So I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But for folks listening, if you want to know some cool science behind acknowledgement, one, bug Cheryl for a copy of her journal, or two, you can go listen to that episode 149. I'll link it up again in the show notes. But it's such a worthwhile thing to incorporate into a morning routine. With that said, your album, oh my gosh. Okay, talk about why you created it first, because I think that is such a cool way to fill a need that you had and that other people have.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So this album is called Luminary. It's technically my fifth album, the first four being those pop records I did. And I knew in the back of my mind, I wanted to do a piano, like solo piano, like not with lyrics and singing. I knew I wanted to do a solo piano-esque album at some point. I even recorded when I was recording piano for one of my last albums. I even kept the microphones on my piano set up for an extra week and like recorded all this piano music and I didn't do anything with it. It just like wasn't calling me. I wasn't liking what I was doing. And that was like 4 years ago. So this past year, I got into a composer residency in Greece, which is basically 2 weeks in this little half-abandoned mountain town in Crete with all these little stone buildings that were completely decrepit, except a few people from Italy and Germany came and had they had money, they were artists, and they came and they refurbished a couple of these villas and little apartments and things. And one of them had a grand piano in this like big stone room. And so I was one of, I think 13 or 14 people, happened to be all women except for one guy. And they're all photographers and choreographers and artists and painters and sculptors. And I was one of the two composers there. So I got this big room to myself, and the piano, you played the piano and the echo in the room with the stone wall. It was just like, it was so epic to me. And I knew I could not recreate that sound anywhere else. So I was like, I'm going to take these 2 weeks and I'm going to record some music, and I'm going to record the music that I've been looking for, which is music that can help enhance my meditation and my mindfulness experiences. All the music I had looked for when I searched for meditation or focus music, it was very like droney kind of, it allowed me to go back to my grocery list and to my to-do lists and to actually let the anxiety come back in a little bit. Like it was too boring and like put me to sleep. Or the other side of it, it was like childish. It was trying to make me be happy when that's not what I was feeling. So I decided that I wanted to write music that I was kind of arbitrary with these numbers, but I was like, how about 10 6-minute pieces that start at a certain place emotionally and then go on a journey over the 6 minutes and bring you to a new place that's happier, peaceful, whatever. So starting feeling a little like there's tension or anxiety a little bit, and maybe it brings it to a place of peace, or maybe there's a little sadness and brings it to happy, or there's a little boredom that brings you to excitement. I actually polled I have a Facebook group with just musicians, and I polled, there's a couple thousand in there. And I was like, what are you either trying to attract or trying to release in your life? And a lot of people said they're trying to release anxiety. And surprisingly, a lot of these musicians said they're trying to attract excitement in their lives, which is funny to me because I always assume all musicians have exciting lives. And it's, I think that was something. So I took a bunch of these words, like they really helped me come up with a bunch of different words, like attract abundance, attract love, release negativity, release guilt. So I created these series based on these just one words, and not all the pieces are like sad and then happy. Like they generally are more uplifting. I wanted someone to be able to take the whole hour and do a yoga class to it. So a couple of the people in this residency actually teach yoga, so they helped me pick the order so that energetically it works for a warm up, and then there's a little more breath and energy and uplift in the middle, and then sort of brings it back down for a cool down. So the order of the album is actually very intentional, so that it could be used for a full hour. And so I ended up recording this record. I would sit down and play the piano. I had my microphone, so I would hum a couple things. I had a bell, so it's just a piano, my voice, and a bell. But I would also like pluck piano strings and do different things with the piano. And then when I would sit with my computer, I would maybe reverse the piano strings. And it sounds like a cello, actually, when you reverse a really low piano string that you plucked. And then I did some stuff with the vocals. So actually the production and how I edited the music became part of the composition process, which was something I had never really done before, which is really, normally I have other people mix my records because I'm not a mixer, I'm a composer. But the mixing was actually part of that process. So it was really, really fun to do. It was a really beautiful experience to be in Greece. A couple times you can hear some cicadas because they were like deafeningly loud. And so I would only be able to record at night because the second the sun went down, the cicadas stopped chirping. And so I realized I had to do all my recording at night. And then in the daytime, I would do the editing. But there was one thing I had recorded before I knew that you can hear a little bit of cicada chirping. There's one point where I did this vocal thing, like a ooh, kind of higher voice thing that I knew I wanted to play with. And like all of the stray dogs in Greece started barking. Like I literally like had to like do the vocal. Like I would get like 3 seconds and then they would all howl for like 5 minutes. I would just sit there and wait for them to stop howling. And I was like, you guys, it's not that bad. So that was fun. So it was even just, it was just a process. It's very different from sitting in a dark studio in New York City and recording a record. There were some challenges that also were inspiring in their own ways.
I love it. So you sent me a link to the album, and we were talking about this a little bit before we hopped on to record. I'm not just saying this. It is one of the most beautiful things that I've ever listened to. It is absolutely gorgeous. I started it and I realized almost an hour later or something, like a really long time had passed. And I just was, I don't know how to describe it. I was like sunk in to this album. I just kind of like wiggled my way in or snuggled my way in. And I just felt like, yep, I hang here now. this is where, it was just like so beautiful. And I can see how it would do what you said, how this music and the way that you've composed it would really support trying to maintain, a perception on your own mind without wandering as much or getting bored or feeling like you almost want to argue back with the music. It's really beautiful.
I love that. Thank you. Argue back, because that is really great. Yeah, you'll hear like little bells throughout, little like sort of scraping sounds. It's really to pierce your listening so that you are brought back to the music. And if you're brought back to the music, then you can be brought back to your breath, which, as you said earlier, it's like, oh yeah, when I'm not breathing, like that's anxiety and nervousness and all these things. And meditation is, a lot of what you hear about meditation is really based in just being mindful about your breath. So I don't say it's an album for meditation, because a lot of people do expect that sort of drone music. And I actually had some person like say, hey, this isn't meditation music. You shouldn't call it that. I'm like, I don't, but good to know. They were like angry with me. And I realized that it really is music for focus, music for mindfulness, music for, I've had people tell me that they went running to it. And then I had other people say that it's the only stuff that will put their kid to sleep. So I'm like, cool. So it's kind of whatever. I think it might be one of those things that it is what you need it to be, which is so makes me so joyous, because I listen to it. And when I listen to it, like driving to my mom's house, I don't fight with my mom anymore. And I'm like, I think that's my music. Like, I think that's the music. Like, is it? Did I do that? And I think I did. Like, I really wanted that to be the case for other people too. And I'm starting, as it slowly releases. It releases February 7th. It's available for pre-order, and all that stuff. When people listen to this, it will probably already be released, but it's available everywhere. And I'm really, it's on some charts already on Amazon and iTunes. Which I'm like, how, really? What? It's not even out yet, and people are already okay. So it's ironic that the first record that's actually doing all the things I want, like getting to the charts, it's, I'm still going to be playing the Grammy game with this. And, that's my huge game. But of course, it's the first record that's not actually like about me. It's not songs about my boyfriends and the breakups and all the, my little like soapbox stuff. It's stuff. It's really meant to do something positive in the world for other people besides myself. And, it feels really good to hear you say all those nice things. So thank you.
How did you come up with the name Luminary?
That's a great question. So every year I pick a word of the year on January 1st. And, being a songwriter, I love words, and I try not to pick a word that I have heard before. So I pick a word, I think about like, am I in a building year, or am I in a am I setting myself up? Is it a building year, foundational year, or did I do that work already and now it's time for me to shine? And so I always start there. And so I realized that I had been working on a musical. I had some other projects that I was like, it's time to get these out the door. And this is before I even knew about Greece coming up. And so I was like, all right, it's a shine year. And so I go to the source and I look up shine, and I found all these, different words and blah, blah, blah. And then I found luminary. And there are 3 definitions for luminary. One is being a source of light in darkness, which I loved, and I love the idea of being a source of your own light. Actually, every single one of my affirmations series that I have one per track. So there's actually 11. They all end with, I am the source of my own light. I am a luminary. And so I'm the source of being the source of light, someone who is a leader in their field, which I also really loved, as someone trying to be that in their field. And then a celestial being, specifically like a sun or a moon. And that just gave me like this really beautiful, lovely graphic to go in my head with. So I just loved all 3 of those definitions. I picked that word. A month later, I was sort of Googling, okay, what are some companies named Luminary? And I found this beautiful all-female co-working space in Manhattan. And I hadn't really been looking for this, but I sort of stalked them for like a month and a half. And I was like, it's too fancy for me. Like I can't have nice things like that. This place looks like a little heaven on earth. So I finally got a tour in March, and it was Women's History Month, so they were running a deal. And I walked in and my soul giggled. I was like, oh my gosh. And I live 2 hours north of New York City, so it takes something for me to get into the city. And I just told my husband, I literally put in my calendar for the next 365 days, 1 day a week. And I just sort of made a default. Every Friday I'm going into Luminary, and I'm going to just have this super productive day where I'm not distracted by the dog or my keyboards and my pianos and things, and I'm going to work on marketing. I'm going to work on all the business sides of what I do creatively. And I had like a better year ever. And I attribute it 100% to the weird little like magical Bermuda Triangle that is this co-working space. So I was just very present to my word of the year, like really giving me something. So when I started doing this record, I always like hem and haw over my album titles. And because I didn't have lyrics this first time, I was like, oh, I can pick literally any word. Like, it's not like I have to pick a song title and the song is about, breaking up with someone on the highway down the truck. That's a country song. I don't write country songs, but like you know what the title is based on the lyrics. I didn't have any parameters. So I had to give myself some parameters in order to find something that really landed for me. And I was like, why not just use this word? And then each track is named something. I did a ton of research on the words for around the energy of the song. So they're very like celestial words. Some of them have some Greek god references in the titles. There's like a scientific name for a butterfly, and that's a whole thing. Anyway, so I kind of was able to stick with Luminary, and so the short answer is it was my word of the year, and it just kind of felt right. The longer answer is it felt like it really being the source of your own light. And I really like that some people said that the album sounds like an electronic music album, or that it's like synthetic, or maybe it's got some orchestra in it, and it doesn't. It's just a piano, a voice, and bell. And so really getting down to the rawness of what the source is. I really like that as an analogy as well. So being the source of your own light, it just kept coming back to that for me. Some of the work I was doing even within my marriage, and one of the reasons I was taking on meditation was to look at myself and be the person who can see me and take that pressure and burden off of my husband. And that codependency, there was something, there was this need to be seen. And the second I really got that I could be the one that sees me, I could be the source of my own happiness and peace and all that stuff. So everything for me in my life was really coming back down to like being the source of your own light, which is the definition of Luminary. So
I love that. And you mentioned the set of affirmations. That's something that if folks are listening to this right as it comes out, if you pre-order, I think they get a set of affirmations with the tell me a little bit about that.
You do. So there are 3 ways you can pre-order on iTunes, Amazon, or Bandcamp. All the links are on the website, IamAluminary.com, which hopefully is easy to remember. And it explains it there. Basically, Bandcamp is this independent site. It's $5 there. You pre-order it, and then I get an email with your email in it. And immediately, or within 24 hours, you'll get an email from me being like, thank you so much. Here's 2 tracks before it comes out, as well as some graphics that you can use for backgrounds on your iPhone or computer that are pretty, sort of inspiring. And here are all 11, because there's a bonus track, affirmations. So it's me recording saying I am positive statements in a theme. So one would be, attracting abundance or releasing negativity over each of the different pieces. So you have 12 tracks. It's the record with spoken affirmations on top of it. So you get that in a zip file you can download to your computer. For people that are like, I don't know what Bandcamp is. That sounds weird. I'm just going to pre-order on iTunes. I have a gift card, or Amazon. I tell people that they can just email me like a screenshot of their receipt or forward their receipt, and I'm happy to just personally email them the affirmations. I will eventually make them available on my website, but if you want them directly from me, I'm doing that right now. The pre-orders and when you purchase the record, whether it's pre-order or it's out, those all go towards hitting the Billboard chart, which is the game I'm playing, because that directly feeds into the Grammy game. So it's a big picture for me as a personal goal, but it also means that the way charts in the music industry work is the higher you rise, the more eyes that get on it. It's a snowball effect. And to me, it really is a way for more people to hear this, as well as sort of hit this milestone that I've set out for myself 17 years ago. So it's a game to play. And I love playing games where I know what it means when I win. Like I know when to tell my friends to whip out the champagne. That's how I work with my goals or game. I like to say the word game instead of goals. I don't know why. It's just I like to think of like anyone that pre-orders is then automatically on my team. Like we are playing this together. So it just feels kind of like a more inclusive thing. But I get really specific, and I really like to say, okay, the game I'm playing is you hit number 1 on the New Age Billboard chart when this is released. And I think for me, knowing that whether or not it's number 1 or number 19 or whatever, there's not a losing thing. It's like I'm living the life of someone who's up to winning a Grammy or up to winning a Billboard, or I'm taking all the steps and I'm seeing things happen that wouldn't have normally happened if I was not playing that game. So it's not, even if I don't win it, it doesn't mean that I lost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I try to put that out there in all my social media and all the promotion of the record. It's actually more about explaining what that is. And other people are writing me being like, I'm actually inspired. Like, tell me about this champagne win you're talking about. Cause I'm like, a lot of people say, oh, my goal this year is to, lose more weight or get more fans, and I'm like, well, how do we know when to break out the champagne? That's more is not a thing. So I try to get specific, and to me, it's always fun when it's very measurable. So that's sort of how I operate.
I love it. As we're wrapping up, I would love if you could tell us what psychological strength means to you.
Yeah, psychological strength to me, I think is awareness and willingness, and the combination of the two of them. Awareness of what it takes to be intentional with your life and create your life, and then willing to do the work to manifest that. I knew for me that it was going to take something for me to stay in my marriage when I knew that it was, and I hadn't tried everything and I hadn't really looked at myself yet. I just wanted him to change. No one knows what that's like, right? And when I finally started doing that, I really found so many other things. And but I had to be willing to look at those shadows. And I think you can't be willing to do something unless you're aware of it in the first place. And honestly, I feel like maybe this time 2 years ago, if someone said, are you psychologically strong? I'd be like, no. Did you see that panic attack I had 2 weeks ago? I don't think I would have been able to answer that. And right now I'm like, hell yeah, I'm psychologically. Mm-hmm. And I think it came from that awareness and the willingness.
Absolutely. Oh, I love it. I'm so excited to be a small part of getting your beautiful album out into the world. I so appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. This has been amazing and a really cool glimpse behind the curtain. I don't know anything about the music industry, so this was really interesting and cool from that perspective as well. I just want to say thank you, and thank you for sharing this beautiful art with the world. Like I said, it was absolutely gorgeous. I highly encourage people to go pre-order or buy, depending upon when you're listening to this. You definitely will not be disappointed. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This is really great.
That was my interview with the amazing Cheryl B. Engelhardt. And as I mentioned in the beginning, Cheryl agreed to share one of the most gorgeous tracks from her new album with us. So without further ado, please listen to the beautiful song, Earthshine.